Chapter 9. Still, the idea Gottfried had sent Rene the luggage ticket troubled Norman, along with the offhand way he had mentioned despising being asked to pay child support. Should he tell Wilhelm, Norman wondered, about the ticket? Had this in some way contributed to Rene's suicide, even though it had legitimately been sent by an uncle? Norman tried to convince himself he was just being nosy, but something didn't add up. He couldn't be sure he'd sufficiently interviewed Gottfried, but he got the impression, at least, that Gottfried hadn't been attempting to move his nephew to a more comfortable mental health facility. He was, at least, seemingly under the impression Rene really was dead. So there went any chances to explain away Rene's look-alike as Rene himself, shuffled through the psychiatric system's programs in an attempt to vouchsafe him greater comforts than were available to patients in secure units like Servways. Unless this was all the grumpy Wilhelm's doing, and he hadn't bothered to tell his brother their nephew was still very much alive. That seemed unlikely. But if Gottfried believed Rene dead, then who was the double? Not a half-brother, according to Gottfried. Norman hadn't considered the possibility a patient could be lost within the psychiatric system due to machinations that weren't purposeful. A human error, perhaps, that resulted in two elderly men being told their nephew was deceased. Could the hospital be padding out their numbers to accrue more funding? But that led Norman back to silly attempts at explaining away the fact Rene's scar had disappeared. He felt like it would be adopting the paranoia patients displayed, were he to actually think some kind of ploy in that regard was at work. But what else explained the scar away? A sudden potent regime of aloe and vitamin E? And, if they had moved Rene, what was he doing in rehab? Surely Rene would have told him if some bureaucratic kerfuffle was afoot. His medications had always worked well enough in the past to ensure he could express himself and understand his surroundings. Why hadn't he recognized Norman? Of course, it wasn't uncommon for very bad cases of schizoaffective disorder to wind up distrusting the volunteers they previously favored. In fact, the more a patient showed a preference for Norman, the more he had come to expect they would eventually drop him, cold turkey. Could eating the ticket have somehow been a release of anger more properly, for whatever reason, directed at Norman himself? Or, suppose Norman had simply seen a man who looked remarkably similar to Rene. These things happened. This other patient could be suffering from schizoaffective disorder. Many admitted to the Fremont-Lowell residential units were. Perhaps he was simply in the rehabilitation unit under a dual diagnosis, aiding recovery from substance abuse as a step prior to dealing with further mental health disorders. Eating the ticket Norman proffered could then have been an entirely meaningless reaction, a random act of insanity. But that man moved like Rene did. He combed his hair like Rene. If Rene had been cloned, hypothetical questions made Norman smile softly as he headed back out of Robin Crescent. Would the clone part its hair on the same side and use the same amount of hair gel? The only route home Norman knew took him back by roads near Wilhelm Monado's house. All right, he was just going to dare himself to drive by once more. Maybe he could gather up enough courage to overlook his own nosiness and try asking the old man if he could think of someone, anyone, in the extended family who might be mistaken for Rene, and be housed in Fremont's residential psychiatric program. He could also mention the ticket. Norman was just passing back by the outlet to Lamhurst Drive. It was a one-way street. He'd have to track back round 3 left turns through the adjoining neighborhoods, when he noticed a commotion out of the corner of his eye. He braked mid-intersection, reversed, to crane his neck and peer. Wilhelm Monado was being forcibly removed from his home by 2 orderlies in blue scrubs. He was putting up quite a fight. Norman put his Megane in drive again and sped to the rescue, only to realize he had no business doing so. Wilhelm's in-home assistant must have called. Had Norman triggered some sort of attack? My God, that would be 3 individuals whose mental health he destroyed in 1 week. Or was Wilhelm the one who had sent Rene the ticket, and Norman the inadvertent tip-off? No, but something wasn't right. Wilhelm may have been privately hurting at the death of his nephew, but he hadn't seemed close to a mental breakdown, at least not to Norman's admittedly unprofessional eye. So what the hell was going on? Orderlies loaded Wilhelm into an unmarked van and moved on down the street. Norman weaved back out from where he'd parked curbside to follow. He kept at a distance, used to tracking suspects, checking his rear view occasionally to make sure he himself wasn't being followed. The van merged onto the ramp leading down to a highway. Norman followed. 40 miles later, it changed lanes to exit. This was the path Norman would be taking to return home anyway. They took exit 109. That was the exit towards Fremont-Lowell. Norman tensed. He was right. They meandered through the side streets he had taken earlier that week to visit Francis, until they pulled up to a white, vertically retractable fence around the back of the Fremont-Lowell Center. The gate raised. The van drove through. Wilhelm was trapped inside. Chapter 10. You know, if Norman didn't know better, he'd say Francis was 100% dead-on accurate, and there was some kind of conspiracy going on in that Fremont Lowell place. He even recognized the silhouette of the unit towards which the van had pulled, once the gate was lowered back down to the ground, as that of the rehabilitation unit across the quad from Francis's residential ward. The brutalist streak of acute angles imposed a now presciently ominous shadow across the quickly fading sunset. He watched by the fender lights of the van as Wilhelm Monado was taken inside. Why would a lapse in mental health lead to a rehabilitation clinic? Had his visit bothered Wilhelm so badly he'd taken some drug? Surely that'd lead to the ER first, even if an overdose. Besides, Wilhelm seemed like the least likely person to do such a thing. He'd just been grumbling like a bigoted teetotaler when Norman left him. Norman reversed to get out of the back alley down which he'd followed the van, hoping, though he tried to tell himself everything was perfectly above board, that no security cameras would pick up his license plate's number. He pulled into the parking lot of a cafe, now closed, and shut off his car engine to give himself time to review. One uncle gets carted off to a mental institution. One uncle claims to have sent a ticket, multiple tickets, Norman supposed, if Gottfried had also been the one to send the ticket that had caused the fight that sent Rene to Serveways. Multiple tickets for a luggage locker to his nephew in a high-security detention unit that he claims was just a ploy to smuggle the boy some spending money, even though he'd have to pull a fair number of strings to even let Rene out of the building for the day to retrieve the money from the locker in the first place. Which reminded Norman, that was another potential oddity of Francis's story. Was it just a coincidence she'd specifically mentioned Hugh Cosimer as being associated with whatever was going on in Fremont's rehab unit? Even at the time, Norman had known Rene getting in the car with Cosimer was against protocol. They weren't supposed to let patients from high-security units out, not even for the weekend. Oh, it was probably all just a coincidence. Rene's aunt's husband's brother's brother. Were Norman still a policeman, and such discrepancies presented themselves, he'd feel he was on the trail of something, and keep on doggedly. That had won him many a case against criminals other officers hadn't even begun to suspect. For 21 years, he'd found drug cartels, insurance scams, the occasional embezzling case. Maybe he was just bored with retirement, jumped at patterns that weren't actually there. An odd thing, how did Gottfried Monado expect to get back in the locker at West End without a ticket? Norman's more sensible mind supposed he could simply describe what was in the locker to prove he'd been the one to put it there. Right. Norman was getting too old for this. But I'm just gonna snoop. The remnants of a stubborn little policeman at the back of his mind decided. He put the Megane in reverse and slipped back silently along the roads to Wilhelm Monado's house. If Monado had had some sort of breakdown, there might be signs of a lash-out still strewn about the interior of his house. Maybe Norman would just peer in, just try to retrace, a little bit, the man's last movements before he was dragged away. Maybe he'd gone to retrieve something out of a drawer. Maybe little old men who lived in quiet villages seldom left all their doors locked overnight. The in-house attendant might have locked up the front door and gone home, or accompanied her charge to the hospital. But that left a lot of friendly-looking patio windows Norman had noticed when he'd popped round before. Casing private property came second nature as a policeman. Always some entryway unprotected by an alarm system, or some porch over a garage by which criminals could easily access second-story windows. He'd just, claim to be a friendly neighbor, dropping by. See if he could find anything that might help Monado. Wanted to make sure everything was locked up properly. He'd heard William had to go to the hospital for a few days. Honestly, being old, Norman could get away with practically anything. It was almost worrying how automatically people trusted him for looking slightly like their grandfathers. He turned back down Lamhurst, driving slowly to give himself time to change his mind, if he wanted to. Any moment now. Francis was the one who suffered from delusions. Sneaking back to Wilhelm's house was probably just straight-up certifiable. But Norman just wanted, just to take a look. Luckily, Norman was spared any more worry over his own sanity by the fact Gottfried seemed to have beat him to it when it came to casing Wilhelm's house, or rather, from where Norman pulled up. It looked a bit more like Gottfried was just flat-out ransacking the place. The front door stood open. 3 men were searching through papers inside. Gottfried stood on the lawn, making one last pawing search through cardboard boxes that had apparently been taken out of the garage, shifted through, and subsequently discarded. "Hey!" Norman leaned out of his car window happily. "I thought I recognized you." He'd decided subtlety called for his stupid cop routine. Perfected while on the beat, this routine aimed at seeming as open as possible, while remaining closely guarded. "Can I help?" He got out of his car all friendly, offering no explanation of what he had been doing driving by at this time of night. "Going over all his old papers, eh?" "Whose?" Gottfried did not appreciate the intrusion. "Rene's." Gottfried gave Norman a strange look. He had assumed, if Norman knew Wilhelm's name, he would know Wilhelm's address as well. Surely the irritatingly omnipresent volunteer visitor had found information about both brothers using the same procedures, and Rene didn't know enough about his uncles to be able to tell Norman where Gottfried lived. Yeah, I figured I should get started going through... He baited Norman to continue talking, then waited. Oh, here, let me help. Norman instead went eagerly to transport one of the boxes Gottfried's helpers left at the front door, to settle it more closely among the rest of the boxes out by the curb. No, it's quite all right. We'll handle it ourselves. Gottfried took the box from him. Thank you, though. He meant it to be dismissive, but Norman kept pressing. Are you looking for some of the luggage tickets he was always claiming you sent him? Norman grinned, appropriately compassionate, to imply he assumed Gottfried was simply looking for mementos. I can help you. No. You know what? Just no. We're fine. I'd like to go over this on my own. Oh, it's so much, though. I can... Look, what are you trying to do? Gottfried was sick of playing this game. You think Rene's on to some kind of mass conspiracy. Is that what this is? You need to reflect and relax, all right? You know? I've seen your type of patient before. They get out, they think they can blend in, they think people won't notice their paranoia. Well, I tell you what, it's rude, you understand? I want to be left alone. No, I was actually just coming back this way to get to your house. I was going to explain. I used to be on the police force. I've still got quite a lot of connections there, so I could cut through the red tape myself, you know, when it came to getting that locker free. Since it was my own damn fault I lost that ticket, I can try to help out. I just feel bad. I know it was a memento. I don't know, for what it's worth. It was the only excuse Norman could think of. Oddly, the weakness of his excuse served a purpose. He wanted to egg Gottfried on a little bit, just to see where he went with it, how the conversation played out. An old policeman's trick, maybe, though Norman had a sinking feeling this might only result in a conversation showing he'd gotten too involved, allowing boredom and retirement to turn him into a weirdo. No, I'll get it, please. The locker's fine. This is just a family matter. I understand you knew Rene, but try to have a little sensibility and leave me alone in my grief, all right? It was curt enough that, in order to keep playing dumb, Norman was forced to retreat. Of course, so sorry, I understand. Call me if you need anything. I'll just leave my card. That's quite all right, thank you. All right, Norman stopped fumbling for his wallet. Have a good night, then. Why didn't Gottfried want the police to help cut red tape and get the contents of his rented locker to him faster? Was he really that private of a person to forego convenience? It was possible. Of course, Gottfried was right. Norman did feel like he himself was playing with fire, seeing patterns he couldn't interpret because he himself was looking in as an outsider. An impertinence? Maybe. But the sudden suspicious meanness. Just what was in that luggage locker? Did Norman trust his own sensibilities enough? Yeah, no, something strange was going on here. Wilhelm. Of course, if he tried to go through official channels in an attempt to satisfy his own curiosity, if he really did call on old acquaintances in the police department just to see what was in that damned locker, Gottfried had every right to block him with bureaucracy and privacy rights every chance he got. Norman just wanted a peek, though. His hackles were raised now. Luckily, from his policing days, he also remembered the simple truth that left luggage lockers in railway stations are remarkably easy to break into, at least if one has the right friends. Chapter 11. Penalties for illegal forced entry weren't exactly conducive to striking up a friendship with the men Norman had met over the years who possessed this unique skill. But there had always been moments of passing recognition, especially in the smaller towns Norman's patrol covered, upon seeing the men he'd put away, now returned from their time behind bars. Occasionally, he would make eye contact with an ex-convict at the superstore, or run into a particularly lippy newspaper stand attendant, only to realize hours afterwards where he'd seen the man's face before. One of the repeat offenders Norman had to deal with was a man named Dmitri Mendel. He had never been sentenced for habitual breaking and entry, he was too clever for that, variating his methods and the timing between heists enough, though he was caught by various counties, that they could never put him away behind bars for too long. It had become a running joke in Norman's life that were he to cross past the public gardens by Lamhurst and Glover around 6 p.m., he would find almost invariably Mendel playing a game of chess or boule with other men who smelled of gin in amongst the park benches. Today was no different. It was pétanque night, as the twilight gathered. Norman could hear the soft murmur and thunk of the balls as he approached. "Dmitri?" he called out in the darkness. "What?" Dmitri looked up to see the silhouette of an oncoming cop. Oh, Christ. He swerved out and away from his compatriots, coming closer. "What is it? I haven't been patrolled appropriately this time? Look at this." He rolled up a dirty pant leg to show the ankle monitor that bulged, half visible, out of his dusty sock. "It's on, it's working." No, that's fine. I'm not working, I'm retired." Oh, Dmitri settled back down and had twirling a spare bokeh ball in one hand, looking Norman over. "So what do you want?" "I need your help with something." "You want me to do some ratting out for you?" No, not quite. Can we take a walk, somewhere more private? Yeah, all right. Dmitri flung the ball back with a careless thunk and a call. I'll be back, then lit up a cigarette and followed Norman. So, what do you need? 1 second, Norman gestured. He bent down and signaled for Dmitri to roll up his pant leg again. He took out a pinlight and shined it over the surface of the ankle monitor. This was an old device, cracked with use, and produced by Tierguard. It wasn't a model that would have audio recording capacities. Dmitri knew instantly what he was looking for. You're in some sort of trouble. Maybe. Norman straightened back up again. I've been volunteering, visiting prisoners in high-security psychiatric facilities. Oh, no, I wouldn't know any. One of my friends, an inmate, recently went missing. They say he's dead. I saw him in a rehabilitation facility just 30 minutes away from the high-security unit he used to live in. At least, I think I may have. I just find it odd, that's all. Dmitri grew silent, watching him. My friend always said his uncle had sent him a ticket that would open a particular locker at the West End train station. I always thought this was just a delusion, because according to the system it was impossible for his uncle to have done so. Then, after his death, I found the ticket. Now, the ticket was taken from me, but I want to see what's inside that locker. Oh. Dawning realization seemed to brighten Dmitri's mood and mental acumen more than Pétanque had in many a day. In truth, he had been feeling the nihilism of encroaching desire for suicide lately. It was why he so readily came to Norman's intimidating beckon, without fuss. Now, the thought of an ironic adventure appealed to his better sensibilities, as a story worth enabling the telling of. I see. So, the cop comes to me, because I know what I'm doing, when he finally realizes he wants to break down the walls of society. No, I want you to break into a locker for me. Can do, for money, and a guarantee if I go down for it, you come with me, because otherwise, the entrapment, it's illegal. Of course, I'll be there with you. We'll break in together. If there was money involved, Norman didn't trust Dmitri enough to let him gain access to it alone. Okay, how much do you pay me? How much do these things usually cost? I think I have about 100 euros from my last pension paycheck I could afford to give you. Deal. But only because this should be fun, working with a cop, yeah? And you're sure you're retired? I wouldn't have to come to you if I wasn't. Yes, I see. You miss having search warrants. All right, I might actually believe you on that one. All right, I will do it. But this is not entrapment, you understand, because you are coming to me with concerns as to the welfare of a prisoner. That means we are protected by laws for whistleblowers. We cannot go to jail. Yes. Assuming, of course, there was actually cause for concern to blow a whistle about. This is not some grand ploy, is it? Dmitri noticed Norman's reserve. He ducked around the closest tree, expecting to see officers closing in. No, I'm just not quite sure. It could be nothing. My friend was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. The ticket, everything. It could just be a delusion. One that you picked up from him as well? I didn't know delusions were catching. They actually can be, but I just want to be careful. I can't promise you we'll be covered by whistleblowers' regulations. That's all right. I'll do it anyway. For my buddy the cop, Dmitri smiled. But you can't tell your friends. Do you have colleagues, old friends, still on the force? No, I don't keep up with them much. Then I'll let you in on a secret, how to get the locker's contents out without being seen. What's supposed to be in it? Documents, according to Rene. And maybe, Norman tried to break it gently, some money. That part I'm not quite so sure about, though. He was always very interested in the possibility there was hidden money around him, but I never saw any definitive proofs. All right, I see. So, how much money? I have no idea. Enough to make him comfortable, according to Gottfried. All right. In a card? In a little chip card? Debit card or cash? I would think cash, if he was going to use it within the psychiatric system. All right, good. You see? You're thinking like me already. This is very good. Okay, and the documents? Rene said they would help ensure he got the money. So, bank statements, IDs. I don't know. All right, so either way, here's what we do. When do you want to do this? As soon as possible. And you cased the location already? Yes. I've got an idea as to how we might be able to get in as well. Perfect, all right. Why don't you tell me it?